Welcome, dear colleagues. Welcome to this side event of the High Level Political Forum 2021, visualizing the SDGs with the partners of the Venice Cities Solution. The Venice Cities Solution is an annual event that is convened by the Italian Association, AICRE, of local and regional governments, by UNDP, by UN Habitat, and by United Cities and local governments. It is our collective efforts to ensure that local and regional governments-led practices can lead to the localization of the Sustainable Development Goals, but also that we come to realize how much of the activity that take place at local level contributes to that to those global agendas. And finally, what we also try to do is to foster the interaction between communities and all stakeholders in this action. When we started working together on this, we came to realize that while many local and regional governments felt that the Sustainable Development Goals was something that was far away from them in an abstract agenda of the United Nations, most of their activities, what they did every day, was very, very related to the goals the international community had set for itself. And the idea of the Venice City Solutions is to bring that close to the ground. So we have been meeting a couple of times now virtually. It goes a little bit against our nature, I have to say, because we want to see actually what is happening there. We want to establish those special contacts that are going to enable us to transform the way that we do things and to go to the next level of partnerships. But I think it is really relevant that the movement has not stopped, that our partnerships and partners keep increasing. And it is particularly important to bring our recommendations, our findings to the high level political forum, because the international community, national governments, but also development agencies need to understand that this movement is happening, that is happening on the ground, and it gives both the agenda and the world as a whole a lot of power of transformation. So our key findings during the last edition were really linked to the fact that we need to act together to overcome problems and also to fight for transformation. Putting communities at the heart was one of the action, was a recurrent concern that all the stakeholders brought to the table. It is also still a challenge to truly have the broader public understand how local, global challenges are. The interconnection between the two is still very important, and hence that title, Visualizing SDGs, remains extremely important. Cities and territories are very important spaces for experimentation and for transformation. And we need to also come to realize that local solutions nowadays are not only local, but neither are global challenges. They are not only global. And so we have, I think, progressed a lot in transforming the narrative around this. Now what we want to see is the resources and the partnership to actually upscale some of the good practices that we have been finding. I am proud to say that for us, the Venice City Solution, so this environment and these partners are also the hub of hubs of our local for action hubs. They multiply and they visualize and they inspire activities of local governments around the world, which we in United Cities and local governments certify as local for action. Those spaces that are currently contributing to our global agendas. And I will end by saying that we also want, in the realm of the Venice City Solution, we want to make a link between the personal commitments, which remain extremely relevant, and personal responsibility, and collective action and collective responsibility. There is no level of government that is better suited to make that connection than local and regional governments. And I think that is also a very important dimension that will touch upon the governance transformation that we need for action. There are many other things that I could say, but I think the most important one is that we are ready to change the quality of our partnerships, to put communities at the center, and to challenge the governance formats and models that we have currently, to actually facilitate a renewed type of service provision that we will need to achieve the SDGs. I'll stop here, and I will now give the floor to a political voice, a representative of a regional government. He is also the president of AICRE, of the Italian Association. He is the president of Emilia-Romagna, a very beautiful and significant region in Italy. And he's also the president of the European section of UCIG, of CEMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. So many hats in that voice. I understand we have inputs from him. President Bonaccini, we give him the floor now.
Venice Solution 2030 che abbiamo attivato già da tempo e che è anche Local for Action Hub ONU è uno di quei luoghi importanti perché il dialogo, la cooperazione decentrata in riferimento agli SDGs e all'Agenda 2030 per gli enti locali sta esattamente all'altezza delle sfide che abbiamo davanti. La più importante delle quali è salvare e salvaguardare il bene più prezioso che abbiamo, cioè il pianeta Terra. E gli interventi di crescita e di sostenibilità sono quelli prioritari e decisivi per garantire che vi sia sviluppo, accesso a servizi e soprattutto garanzia che il lavoro non manchi a nessuno in ogni parte del mondo, perché lavoro è dignità e perché qualità dei servizi per le persone ha direttamente a che fare con la qualità delle nostre vite. Buon lavoro a tutti e a presto.
So with that voice and that testimony, the proof of the political mandate that we have in this endeavor, I would like to introduce a very important partner as well of the Venice City Solution. And I would say a partner without whom we wouldn't have been able to develop this concept, which is the UN SDG Action campaign. The type of campaigning, of activism that the Action campaign has been promoting over the year is an inspiration to all of us. And I think it has triggered new types of partnerships, and above all, a lot of ownership and involvement worldwide. So I'm delighted to have with us Xavi Longan, lead of partnerships and operations of the United Nations SDG Action campaign, who is going to be facilitating the next segment. And I would like to take this opportunity, Xavi, to ask you one question before you start doing your formal job, and that is, do you also feel that we have evolved in the way that we do partnerships? What do you feel that has changed? Is it the actors that have changed, or is it rather what we prioritize and doing together? I know it's a difficult question, but you only have 2 minutes to answer it. Go ahead, Xavi.
Thank you so much, Emilia. Thank you for putting me on the spot. But most of all, thank you for the kind introduction. I think both have changed. I think how partners work together has changed. I think what's prioritized has changed. I feel that, and that's a sort of sentiment that the entire team in the UN SDG Action Campaign shares, is that we are at a turning point for people and planet. The pandemic has put us in this position, and we're in a position to make bold choices, to make bold decisions on how we want to go forward. And that goes to your question. So we need to work together. We need to think outside the box, work with partners that were not there before, that we didn't work with before. And we need to get our priorities straight, which should involve, obviously, you know, a sort of healthy, just, and environmentally friendly recovery to the pandemic. That should be our goal, working together with all constituencies. So local governments is at the center of this effort. We need civil society, we need the creative sector, we need private sector, and many others. Thank you, Emilia.
Thank you, Xavi. I very much agree with you that we are at this kind of foundational moment, and that this kind of realization that we need to transform, and that we are not able to do things in the same way, is what is really defining our partnerships. My sense is that we are working with the same people, but we are emphasizing different issues, and hopefully we can actually make a difference together. Please do count on United Cities and local governments to trigger that change. We are working towards a renewed contract, a pact for the future, and we are delighted to continue feeding this space, the Venice City Solution, and getting out of it all this energy and inspiration to inspire local governments around the world. And now your official job, Xavi. Good luck with the moderation. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much again, Emilia. It's always very humbling to take the floor after you. I have to say that we're already doing very well with the timekeeping, so we'll try to stick to that. And let me welcome again everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. Let me say first off also that we will be looking at the chat box on this event, taking your questions, and hopefully we'll have time to get our speakers involved in some of those questions. It's really, for me, a great pleasure and an honor to welcome you all. We have with us 4 distinguished speakers who are very passionate about the SDGs, just as we all are. I will introduce them in a moment, but I would like to start with sharing a quick overview of the 4 themes that we explored last year in Venice, and that the 4 speakers will help us to navigate today. These are 4 tracks that are all related to the core principles of the Venice process, which is to generate new ideas and tools to help local governments to analyze and understand the ongoing dynamics in their cities through the lens of the SDGs. In Venice, we also want to bring along new partners that can work together with local governments to make the 2030 Agenda a reality for all. So our concept of visualizing the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda at local level is designed to bring to light how, within the urban context, different SDGs interact with each other, what kind of stakeholders are involved, and how to use the data gathered to devise and implement policies that can more effectively contribute to achieve the SDGs and deliver on the 2030 Agenda overall. So now on to the 4 tracks, which I will outline very quickly. The first track is what we call the yellow track, which focuses on how to land the SDGs on the territory and the need to map local actions in space. We have asked our speaker for this track to showcase some examples about how to map SDG challenges and develop tools that can contribute to visualize and achieve the SDGs in urban contexts. We'll turn to that in a second, but let me tell you a bit about the second track, which is the red track. And this is about the vision for the future and the role of the SDGs as a common language that can facilitate dialogue and building common ground between different actors. The third track is the green track, which focuses on SDG interactions and connections in the city framework. Under this track, we will dwell upon the importance of a social contract, which Emilia has already referred to, between all the different stakeholders of a community in order to effectively achieve more sustainable societies. And also we'll look at how SDGs interact with each other in the very special framework that is the city. And finally, the fourth and last track is the blue track, which will serve as an invitation to all of us to know better and to understand better the Local for Action hubs, which, as Emilia mentioned, it's an initiative led by UCLG and launched last year during the Venice City Solutions, which has now become the moment where the UCLG Local for Action hubs meet and exchange every year as a sort of hub of hubs. Now, to start unpacking this very exciting and very packed program, let me turn to our first speaker, who will walk us through the yellow track on linking SDGs to the territory and mapping local actions in space. He's Peter Suska, and he's the team leader for urban economy innovation at the Fraunhofer Institute, where he helps both private and public sector clients to find the best ways to adapt to climate change in cities. He previously worked at Prague City Economic Development and is a graduate from Columbia, LSE, and Queen's University. Peter, welcome. The floor is yours.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I've prepared a presentation with pictures, which always helps to visualize what I'm talking about. I'm just not controlling it. Can someone share the presentation, or do I need to pull it up? I guess Maria, or yeah, Maria. Sorry for the pressure. All right. I might have to open it. Can I somehow? I might have to open it here as well.
You can see it actually.
I can see it, but it's very tiny. I can see it, but anyway, maybe we can go down. So Fraunhofer, and why I'm here and what I'm talking about. So we have been supporting previously UN Habitat and now UNDP. So our special connection is, of course, through Diana, who's kindly co-organized this event. We've been working together for quite some time. And Fraunhofer is Europe's largest applied research organization with some 3 billion euros that we invest into applied research, and some of our inventions include the well-known MP3 format that all of you are using in your smartphones. Perhaps we could go to the next slide. So our institute, of course, Fraunhofer is made up of a number of different institutes, and in our institute specifically focuses on the urban realm, and we do understand the world as a place where we promote maximum livability and decrease carbon footprint where we can. Of course, last but not least, we see cities as agents that drive innovation, because of course we've learned this through our experience. We can't only rely on the market to drive innovation forward. Next slide, please. How we do it is we do use the SDGs as the basis framework to which we've linked our entire methodology. So this is an example how we break down the urban system and how we assess its sustainability. This is an assessment of one of the European cities here, and we look at urban leadership and the ability of cities to actually drive change and fulfill the different SDG goals. We look at different levers. So what are actually the different elements that a city can pull in order to drive change, and then of course what are some points of action where you would bring and mobilize an entire local ecosystem to meet your SDG targets. So SDGs for us, and I'm sure you would be happy to hear this, is a complete basis of our operation wouldn't be able to work without it. And we are very thankful that such a thing exists, because it gives us all a standard that we can all kind of link back to. Next slide is a picture that was actually used during the Venice 2030 event last year. And it was a colleague of mine who was presenting their take on how they visualize and work with SDGs. They use 3D computing solutions, and they basically would showcase different types of environmental and non-environmental data. What you see here is actually an emotional data analysis. So the participants in this particular city were able to drop their sentiments on specific intersections and parts of the city, and the city planners were able, again, to work with those and integrate those into their local strategies. Yeah, of course, again, for them, the SDGs provide a basic framework for their methods and tools of visualization to be transferable. So we work with them not only in the German context and the European context, but for example in Montevideo. So the solutions are not reserved only for the European partners or the European public sector actors, but about the whole world. If we go to the next one, it's a very interesting one. It was another example from the next slide, from the sorry, this slide. It's just need to check from the, exactly, that's the correct slide, from the event in Venice. And we work with another company called Havadava, and they what they do is they visualize air pollution and link it to climate change. They've co-developed their own satellite, and they would use satellite imaging and different types of sensoric data to actually monitor air quality in terms of what parts of a city are being affected, and how city governments can better change their approaches and install measures or put measures in place to mitigate the negative effects, of course, of air pollution. Their pilot project actually took place in Cairo with huge success, and since then it's been scaled to a couple of other cities. It's again an evidence-based SDG anchored approach to providing a visual illustration to how SDGs and SDG related measures can be put into practice in cities around the world. Next slide is a bit of a different one. So this is something because we've the discussion we've had with Diana about Venice 2030 and the event last year was, how can we drive and support individual change? How can we inspire people to take action on an individual level, not to just rely on what the government does for them? I mean, there's a famous quote from JFK who said, don't ask what you can, or don't ask the government what it can do for you, but ask yourself what you can do for your country. And I think this is kind of a great example of that in practice. So MasterCard has a spin-off, and it's called a Duconomy, and they've been working with huge data sets of carbon footprint data linked to particular products. They have millions and millions of products, everything from t-shirts to bookshelves to electronics. And so every time you do a purchase, if you have that card, or if you're part of that program, it tracks your CO2, and you can see it here very well that you've spent, here it's in Swedish krona, 3,200 Swedish krona. And you generated 56 kilograms of CO2. Now it categorizes this into air travel, transportation, groceries, clothes, and it knows what you've been buying and calculates your CO2 footprint. And this, again, evidence-based quantified approach helps you understand at the end of each month or end of each week, end of each year, how much CO2 you've produced and what measures you can take to mitigate it. So of course you can offset it by paying off to a global carbon offsetting fund, and there are other options that of course you can use. But what this does is it provides you with a very nicely graspable visual data that you can use to change your behavior in terms of what you purchase and how much CO2 you produce. So again, a very much relevant solution. I do hope that one day all of us will have a bank bill with not just how much we spent, but how big our carbon footprint was. And perhaps we can reduce both of those numbers. Next slide is my thank you. It was a pleasure to be here and to kind of give you not a summary, but hopefully an impulse on how important the SDGs are for us and how visual tools can help us make them more understandable and relevant for not just city governments, but also individuals living in your cities. So I guess I'm open for questions. We still have maybe a couple of minutes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was absolutely fascinating. Maybe I'll share a question. I come from a campaign, so I'm always curious, of the sort of advocacy potential of any initiative, and I was wondering if you can maybe share an example or just some thoughts on how these visualizations, this data analysis can be turned into a sort of advocacy tool that then constituencies, whether it's civil society or others, can use to change policy, to bring to governments, whether at local level, national level, and use it to change policy.
I mean, the saying, a picture is more powerful than 1,000 words, right? So, but you can't have policies in cartoons. I'm sorry, I'm joking, but I think there is a line. I think images are extremely important to convince people that what we're doing makes sense and drives change. And that's what we've been doing. We've been using that as a tool of participation, as a tool of explaining to governors, to the general public, to the different stakeholders, how important it is for us to protect the environment, to build our communities in a sustainable way. And for that, it's fantastic. What I've seen some of these cities doing, particularly in Scandinavia, but not just there, is they would use those images as an illustration of the changes that will be accomplished or the problems that they're reacting to when they're pushing a particular policy forward. And I think having that as an attachment to any policy is very, very powerful. Now, of course, the visual tools nowadays are not passive, like you just saw them in a PowerPoint. But what I think the future really is this immersive experiences. You'll be actually able to experience the change. And if I had all of you here, I would take you to our digital cave, which we have here downstairs in our office. And you could experience that change. You could walk through a building, you could walk through a city, you could experience the difference between having 1,000 cars pass through a street and 14,000 cars pass through a street. You can see the air pollution levels. You can see the fine particulate matter and how that affects people. So I think we need to do both. And it might be boring to do policy, but it's very important because the images are not enough in and of themselves, and they have to build a story, and that's what we use them for, is to build story and to drive participation and community engagement on all different levels of decision making.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. Yes, I very much hope that we can soon come to see you physically and have that experience in person where you are. Thanks so much for joining us today. We know you need to run, Peter. Thank you.
There's one question here I'd like to answer. I think on low-income countries, I think the only tools that make sense are the ones that work everywhere. And I think one of the pictures I've shown from Havadava, it was actually developed in a developing country, and I think we need to sometimes really go and test these visual tools in the harshest environments, and in maybe the most adversarial places, and not always pursue the easy route forward. because only then will we be able to drive change on a global level. And I think that's something to be said about the visual tools that I've shown. Most of them actually have a global impact and are globally available. Particularly, I saw that someone posted the Duconomy topic. We've been working with them, and they're basically going to scale to the rest of the world. They started out of Sweden, and I know they're growing fast. So you might be able to get your low CO2 cards, and hopefully in the next coming months and years. So, and when it comes to the visual tools, I'm sure if there are some specific questions, I'd be happy to direct you to the either myself or whoever might be the actual solution owner.
Great. Thank you so much again, Peter. It was great having you. And we'll move now to the next track, which is the red track, which, as you may remember, focuses on the vision for the future. Our panelist for this track is Remy Sijbing. I very much hope I'm pronouncing this remotely correctly. Remy is the chief of the Policy, Legislation and Governance section at UN Habitat. Prior to this, Remy managed the Regional and Metropolitan Planning Unit at UN Habitat and oversaw projects and programs related to national urban policies, metropolitan planning, spatial planning, integrated development plans, and smart and green cities. Remy is a graduate from the Universities of Melbourne and Yaoundé in Cameroon. Thank you, Remy, for joining us today. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Javier. Colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me here on behalf of UN Habitat to first thank the co-organizing partners, especially UNDP, UCLG, ACRA, and the SDG campaign for the strong partnership that we have built over time to celebrate the Venice City Solutions and during this high-level political forum. As some of you know, the Venice City Solution is a yearly event, as was mentioned earlier, and a high-level political meeting. They have become really the milestone, the meeting moments and time to look at the global debates on the SDGs, but more importantly on what that means for local and regional entities, and the localization of SDG become very critical. In that sense, in this track, visualizing the SDG topic is of extreme relevance for cities and local and regional government in such a moment. As we have seen here, the visualization has just been shown is just a great illustration of such effort. We know that we are facing a multidimensional and complex crisis, of which public health and COVID is just one of them. So the full consequences on how our world and society will overcome and be, we look in the future is unfolding. So we cannot really say for sure, but the world will not be the same due to that the multi-dimensional crisis we are facing. But the question is, what we do know in that cities, local and regional governments are at the center of that emergency, because the size of population and high degree of interconnectivity that we have across the territory, as was mentioned earlier, is very much important in the context of the spread, say, of the virus. So we cannot work just at one level. We have to connect, we have to work at a multi-level. Therefore, the deep-rooted inequalities that we see in cities, in different nations and contexts and territories can really influence the way in which, say, COVID-19 has shown in terms of its impacts, and how some marginalized or new groups of deprived citizens have been able to face this type of situation. We have also, as I said, multiple crises. When you look at the economic decline, it's clear that cities, local and regional government may lose an average of 15 to 25% of their revenue in 2021 due to the pandemic. And this will affect very much the vulnerable communities, affect the services, especially the basic services, deepening inequalities of within spatial and social inequalities that we are already witnessing in different parts of the cities, including where you are. Therefore, I think visualizing refers to really try to imagine how the city of the future would look like and then plan accordingly with this notion that inequality, if you plan with the idea that inequality can be reduced, then it's better. We're going to cushion some of these vulnerable groups. Therefore, the SDGs is a great tool in that way to start imagining cities where no one is left behind, where no space is left behind, where the territory is considered, where there's this connection between all tiers of governments, all actors. So that's, for me, is a premises for start envisioning, imagining our future, where we see that as collective. Okay, not only that, using such imagination where we all work together help us build a common vision and plan together, but using SDGs as a tool for multi-level governance where there is not only for the public governance, but the community governance, the network of governance, where we see local, national, subnational, regional authorities working together with communities, not among the vertical and horizontal connections, but through the network of connections. The work of UN Habitat in SDG localization is very much focusing on making sure that we connect with partners like we are here, that we coordinate the implementation of the new urban agenda, that we bring this the power of urbanization at the local level. As we work through crafting the strategy for localizing SDGs at UN Habitat, we have three main areas for those who are not quite aware. It's our global urban monitoring framework that we have been tasked by the General Assembly to develop, which will be available in 2022. So we are now finalizing that. The second one is the voluntary local review. We are very pleased with our great collaboration with UCLG in developing the guidelines and the next version, and we are currently working over 69 local voluntary local reviews, and we have over 30 in the pipeline. So 2021, 2022 will be very exciting for the voluntary local reviews. And we heard earlier from Emilia saying this is a movement. It's indeed a movement that is taking the world over. The third one is really our SDG Cities flagship initiative that we do again in collaboration as our effort and contribution to localize SDGs at the really city level. Again, based on what I just discussed, we focus on the visioning first, what type of cities, what type of cities using SDG framework would look like. Then we try to develop action plan for that visualization and develop strategies and formulate specific initiatives or programs or projects for the localization, so they are not just hanging there. Okay, so for 2022, as some of you are aware, we are in Habitat 3+5. That will be something we have to work towards and use that as a platform opportunity to advance our shared partnership, our shared vision, our common interest in localizing the SDG. The other one is the World Urban Forum, the 11th edition in Katowice in Poland in June 2022, where we hope that this coalition, this movement will continue and really make a dent or make a splash during the World Urban Forum. The last one is what we have now. I'm very pleased how the Venice movement and then the high-level political forum has seen us as really the the proponent of this localization of SDG, highlighting through these two important events. So to conclude, just to say that, again, we base our engagement on partnership in working together for including some joint efforts we have on local 2030 initiative, so that we have really a real global coalition for localizing SDGs. And we are very pleased that with UNDP, we co-host the secretariat for that coalition. So as we move forward, colleagues, I would like to just reiterate UN Habitat commitment and availability to continue supporting and working together to strengthen the localization, the visualization of SDGs, to raise voice of local regional governments within the international community, especially within the UN family. So count us as friends, as we always try to do. So we look forward again to continuing this rich and very fulfilling partnership and collaboration. So Xavi, that's what I had to share for now. And I would like to thank all my colleagues for this great opportunity, including Martino and many others. Over to you, Xavi.
Thanks a lot, Remy. Thank you for this very insightful contribution. And thank you also for the timekeeping. You're really making my job super easy today. I really appreciate that. Okay, I think there was an immediate question on the chat about the sort of web addresses, the URLs for these initiatives. Maybe, Remy, you can later share some links directly on the chat for everyone's benefit. There is a question also that I would like to ask you in terms of, you referred to this already, but it would be great if maybe you can elaborate a bit in terms of how do the VLRs help to visualize SDGs at city level, and maybe also linking back to the question previously to Peter, and also how these visualizations can be leveraged in the conversation with the city planners and with other levels of government. Remy.
Thanks, Xavi. Yes, we're going to post the link and many other resources we have on VLR and other resources on the chats for those who might be interested. In terms of how VLR visualization is happening at local level, through the three tools that I mentioned, say the monitoring and even the report we are producing for those who have seen sample that we are producing with UCLG. They are very much visual. They make sure that it talks to some audience. They use data, use maps, use other to actually localize, to show where the differences have been made if it's at the local level. So through the reports that we are producing, through our how we present the findings of the VLR, that's one of the instruments we are using. So that's some of the tools we are using, and we hope that when we come to Katowice, we're going to have more visual, including some audio, visual, some video of how this is happening, so that we can really go through the continuum of visualization, which is not only map or some graphs and other, to explore all types of catching people attention on what SDG means at local level. So we'll be exploring all these media of communicating what's happening at local level.
Thank you, Remy. We really appreciate your time and contribution. Don't go away. We'll have more questions later. If you're around, we can come back to you. But now let me turn to the third speaker today for the Green Track, which focuses on SDG interactions and connections in the city framework. So our third speaker is Gift Ntuli. Gift is the head of experimentation at the UNDP Accelerator Lab in Zimbabwe. And before he worked at the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization as part of a team of seismologists and geophysicists. He is a geophysics and seismologist by training, and a university professor for several colleges in the United States. Gift, thank you very much for being with us today. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone joined. First of all, I want to say thanks a lot on behalf of the UNDP Accelerator Labs for this invitation. For those who don't know, the labs were a group, a network of, I would say, innovation labs, I should say, but at the same time, I would say a learning network comprised of people who are trying to learn how to accelerate development and also at the same time, how we can use new data sets and what kind of partners we can bring together to make sure that we achieve the 2030 agenda faster. So really appreciate it. And for today, I'm going to spend the next 9 to 10 minutes walking you through some of the work that we've done in Harare, Zimbabwe, in trying to understand how SDGs interact in an informal environment and how that can help us address the challenge of urban hunger. So if we go to the first slide, just a little bit information about Harare. It's called the Sunshine City because there's always sun in Harare. 3 things to note about Harare is that it's a very young city with the average age being around 18. And at the same time, it's highly informal because generally in Zimbabwe, about 90% of the country is informal. But at the same time, what we noted that is because of COVID, there's been this drastic increase in urban hunger. And us as the Accelerator Lab in Zimbabwe, that's the question we're trying to answer, to say what can be done from an SDG angle to address the challenge of urban hunger in Zimbabwe. So if we look at the next slide, what we note, I'll quickly highlight that informality in Zimbabwe is very complex. If you look at urban hunger in Harare, we see that the informal systems that provide food into Harare are highly sensitive and as a result more susceptible to COVID. We have the production side, the distribution, and also the consumption. But a key factor along all these lines, I would say, is 2 things. First is the unavailability of data. But at the same time, this fact that a highly complex financial environment and also bylaw environment opens up opportunities for, I would say, these middlemen to take advantage of the system. So as a result, for us, if you go to the next slide, the question we had that we posed as the lab was, how can you measure, on the next slide, please, how can you measure SDG interaction and engagement in a highly informal environment? And we ended up realizing that there's 2 ways you can go about this. The first one is to do data analytics. And then the second way is to do what we call systems thinking. And with data analytics, if we look at the next slide, we worked with a startup in Silicon Valley called Flow to analyze huge amounts of data spanning over 8 years, looking at supply and demand or volumes being supplied to, or farm produce being supplied to Harare. And what we're doing is that we're trying to use this information to create a proxy for SDG interactions and connections from an angle of urban hunger. Then the second thing was that we're looking at treating the challenge as a system that's composed of 3 axes. And from this system, you're able to ask yourself, which SDGs do you need to query and what relationships exist between those SDGs for you to then understand how to tackle the challenge you're trying to tackle. So I think we might have a glitch because I see the slides are not progressing. But the next slide that we're going to look at, we're going to start, so if you go to the next slide after this, please. You see that, we start looking at interactions between our SDGs, and clearly the first thing we noted from our data was that there's a strong relationship between climate change and the amount of produce being supplied in Harare, mainly noting from the data sets, which I'll be happy to share after this, that drought is causing a dip in produce, but at the same time, we're seeing that leading to increase in poverty and hunger. And if we look at the next slide, we also used the system approach to look at the relationship between gender, COVID, and hunger. And what we noted is that because of a lack of infrastructure in Harare, what's happening is that it's easy for female vendors who constitute the majority of vendors in Harare to be harassed and also coerced into activities that they might not want to take part in. And for us, we're saying it's mostly because of the lack of clean water, sanitation, energy, storage facilities. And then that also leads to the next relationship that we looked at, which was looking from an angle, next slide, looking from an angle of sustainable cities and production and consumption. And from this, we again went back to data analytics, and we're looking at what amount of produced food that gets into markets is consumed and what percentage ends up getting lost to food waste. And what we saw again was that there's need for us to understand how we can better improve sustainability in the cities, but mostly looking at an angle of urban agriculture. And that took us back again to climate change as an SDG, and looking at mapping our urban wastelands, wetlands, and trying to see how these are being used by city dwellers for urban agriculture. Then if we look at the next slide, we did again use the data sets and this system thinking to then start asking ourselves, what's the relationship between informality, youth, and employment? Mainly because you see, if I canceled informal economy, because in Zimbabwe, since the informality is about 90%, we tend to call it the economy. At the same time, an understanding of all these linkages led us to the realization that on the next slide, what we need in Zimbabwe is what we're terming a new approach, systematic funding. The idea behind systematic funding is that now we're going back to the city and saying, realizing that Harare is highly informal in these complex dynamics that exist between SDGs. How about we try to come up with 3 pillars of focus areas. And from those 3 pillars, we can then use this systematic funding to try pull together investors who might be interested in any of those pillars, but we set up the pillars in such a way that they are entangled. And if you try to fund one pillar, you are indirectly or directly funding other pillars. And for every pillar, there are SDGs tied to it. So the main advantage for this is that for investors, you are de-risking your investment. So for us right now as a lab, we have 2 pools of funds. We have one fund coming from the private side. So we're asking private companies to state which of the nodes or pillars that they want to fund. You know, also asking the public sector and NGOs to fund the other pool. And if you go on the next slide, you realize that we've picked 3 nodes or pillars that we've used to create our system fund. We have the first one, which is production. So we're looking at production and trying to address SDGs linked to poverty, hunger, and climate change by using climate smart technologies and really understanding the role that wetlands and urban agriculture play in ending urban hunger. Then the next one is data. Again, looking at sustainability and trying to create a value chain that empowers this informal system so that they use more data insights. And the last one is focused on research. So, so far we are working on this program and trying to combine funds coming from the private sector and the public sector to fund any of these 3. And in doing that, we ensure that we are having all the SDGs we identified are funded. Going to the next slide, just want to conclude by saying 3 key takeaways. The first one is that if you look at SDG interactions in a city framework, especially from an informal perspective, you see that the dynamics are highly complex. So I highly encourage all of you to consider this systems thinking and also the use of data analytics. And once you do that, then I also challenge you to consider this systematic funding approach. And I'll be more than happy to discuss in detail how to set up a systematic fund for funding a variety of SDGs, but using public funds and private funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift. Thank you so much for this insightful contribution. So I would like to ask you first a very concrete question. I think it was very interesting to see how SDG 2 has been leveraged, in terms of the planning at the city level to combat hunger. Maybe in terms of the financial planning, would you have an example also on how at the financial level this type of exercise has been done again at the city level in Harare?
Yeah, thanks. So I think two quick examples. The first one is looking at large scale. There's a program that UNDP Zimbabwe is doing called Safe Markets. And Safe Markets is leveraging from some of this work to say, if we're to build back better, where do we need to allocate more funding for infrastructure development? And we're noticing that by understanding how the funds that are being utilized at city scale tend to affect other SDGs, that's allowing the city to identify key areas to set up new markets. So of course they're trying to decongest markets, but at the same time also looking from a gender perspective to say what's the best utilization of funds to ensure that post-COVID the markets that are set up are more gender friendly. So I think right now there's Harare, Bulawayo, and Mutare. Those are the three cities that are benefiting from this work. Then the second one, I would say, looking from a systematic fund in trying to pull in a private sector to contribute towards the creation of a system that's taking informal knowledge and information and turning it into an index, I would say, or trying to call it a loan index that then unlocks funds for financial inclusion, trying to include other citizens within the city that are usually not able to gain loans from traditional banks, and then see how that then feeds into trying to tackle urban hunger and infrastructure in the city.
Thank you, Gift. So one more question, and I will ask you to answer in 1 minute if possible. It's a sort of fundamental question that we got from the audience. What are the accelerator labs and how are they funded? Maybe if you can tell, I know it's a difficult one to answer in 1 minute, but it'd be great if you can tell us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the idea behind the labs is UNDP recognized that the development environment is changing. So they said, let's come up with this network, a learning network that's funded by donors. I think our main donors is Qatar, Italy, and Germany. And they're working together to bring these funds to say, can we have one person per country who's focusing on experimentation, another one on solution mapping, trying to find out solutions in the country, and another role focusing on data and partnerships. And how can these three roles drive development at a faster pace? And the key thing is learning. Whatever happens in Zimbabwe or in Togo, in Kenya, we all share these outcomes every Tuesday. So in a nutshell, these are the labs. Yeah, just a huge learning network.
Perfect, Gift. That was 1 minute. Great elevator pitch for the accelerator labs. And thank you, Gift, for being with us today. We'll move on now to the fourth and last track of the session. It's the blue track, which focuses, as you all know by now, on the Local for Action hubs, which is an exciting initiative led by UCLG. And I'm sure most of you anyway are familiar with it. To tell us all about it, let me welcome Pilar Diaz, Deputy President and Delegate for International Relations at the Barcelona Provincial Government. Pilar has also been the mayor of Esplugues de Llobregat since 2006. It's a city I know well. I was born 20 kilometers from this city. And Pilar has also been a member of the regional parliament in Catalonia. Pilar, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos días, buenas tardes a todos y a todas, alcaldes, alcaldesas y representantes de los gobiernos locales y regionales y las instituciones socias, yo diría en general, pues colegas, colleagues. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a CGLUN, a la Asociación Italiana del Consejo de Municipios y Regiones de Europa, al Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo y a ONU Habitat, por la oportunidad que nos brindáis de poder participar en este evento. Celebro, aunque sea en este formato virtual y telemático que ya nos hemos habituado, celebro poder encontrarme de nuevo con muchos de vosotros, con muchas de vosotras, con los que desde la Diputación de Barcelona, la institución que represento, venimos colaborando desde hace tiempo para facilitar la transición hacia un mundo más sostenible, más resiliente, más justo, más igualitario y más inclusivo. En este marco, ahora presentaré los Local for Action Hubs, esta iniciativa que CGLU impulsa para visibilizar el rol transformador de las ciudades y los territorios y como elemento clave para potenciar la consecución real de los ODS. Visualizar los ODS en las ciudades para CGLU significa hacer visible los esfuerzos de implementación de estas agendas por parte de los gobiernos locales y regionales, es decir, localizarlas. Significa reconocernos más que nunca como la clave del éxito de la implementación de la Agenda 2030 y la consecución de los objetivos. Además, la actual pandemia ha puesto en perspectiva el papel crucial de los gobiernos locales como primeros agentes de respuesta y proveedores de soluciones. Más hemos respondido, yo diría bien y rápido, pero sobre todo rápido. Hemos sido los primeros en reaccionar. Reconociendo el poder transformador inherente a las acciones locales, la necesidad de fortalecer y ampliar la acción colectiva y la transformación hacia el cumplimiento de las agendas globales, la iniciativa Local for Action Hubs de CGLU celebra las prácticas y procesos desarrollados localmente y apoya su difusión, escalabilidad y replicabilidad para acelerar la localización de las agendas globales. La iniciativa Local for Action Hubs ancla la localización de las agendas globales en las prácticas locales, procesos e iniciativas innovadoras de los miembros, proporcionando la plataforma para inspirar, conectar, sincronizar y acelerar la entrega de las agendas globales. Proporciona visibilidad y una etiqueta, una marca de CGLU a las iniciativas ambiciosas y transformadoras de los gobiernos locales y regionales y sitúa así los enfoques locales de la sostenibilidad en la vanguardia de la conversación global. Gracias a las políticas y acciones públicas locales, especialmente en tiempos de crisis y de pandemia, la transformación que necesitamos para hacer de la Agenda 2030 una realidad, pues esto realmente puede tener lugar. A partir de la edición del año pasado, de 2020, el encuentro Benicity Solutions 2030 integra oficialmente el proceso de desarrollo de las iniciativas Local for Action Hubs de CGLU, convirtiéndose, nosotros diríamos y yo diría, en el hub de los hubs y en su punto de encuentro. Este espacio de interacción congregó en el 2020 y congregará anualmente las diversas soluciones y experiencias locales y regionales aportadas y desarrolladas por los Local for Action Hubs en un solo lugar, dando la posibilidad de una reflexión conjunta sobre lo que se hace desde las ciudades para implementar la Agenda 2030. De este modo, el encuentro de Benicity Solutions, que hoy estamos reportando, confirma a los Local for Action Hubs como una comunidad que fomenta el papel de los gobiernos locales y regionales en la implementación y configuración de las agendas globales y demuestra el compromiso claro de alcaldes y alcaldesas y gobiernos locales en general con esta hoja de ruta. Las primeras experiencias compartidas desde los Local for Action Hubs han abordado retos y proponen soluciones escalables para avanzar hacia las transformaciones y los compromisos solicitados por esas agendas globales. Desde el proyecto que impulsamos desde la Diputación para la igualdad de género, la juventud y la transformación intergeneracional, la cultura como cuarto pilar para el desarrollo sostenible, los valores compartidos y la co-creación de hojas de ruta hacia la sostenibilidad, la gobernanza abierta para la acción climática, la transformación social y urbana a través de la ecología, la recuperación basada en soluciones en la naturaleza o en la defensa de los servicios públicos. Yo pienso que todos y todas tenemos el objetivo de construir redes y alianzas para la localización de la Agenda 2030, precisamente teniendo en cuenta que el último objetivo es precisamente esa necesidad de alianzas. Las iniciativas han contado con la participación activa de diferentes ciudades y territorios como Xi'an, Roma, Bilbao, la provincia de Santa Fe, Buenos Aires, Cuenca, Leiden, Madrid, Pamsi, Aicre y también la propia Diputación de Barcelona. Y se encuentra trabajando con otras experiencias para ampliar esta comunidad. Cada una de estas iniciativas está generando un ecosistema de socios, de partners, ciudades, de actores alrededor de la experiencia local para transformarse en un proceso global de transformación replicable y escalable a nivel global, que es lo realmente importante, que eso después pueda ser también replicado y escalado. La iniciativa celebra y fomenta el compromiso de los actores del territorio para compartir sus procesos, sus innovaciones, sus conocimientos, aprovechar todo ese talento, impulsando la conexión local, global y las posibilidades de aceleración y sincronización de las acciones locales para asegurar un impacto más fuerte y sostenible desde el territorio. En este marco, la iniciativa de Local for Action Hubs de CGLU ha estado concretando líneas de trabajo a futuro para mejorar los medios de los gobiernos locales y regionales para la implementación de la Agenda 2030 y la iniciativa, sumando la fuerza de las experiencias locales, en este momento busca, lo podría resumir en 3 elementos, 3 líneas. Una es identificar y potenciar nuevas experiencias que desde lo local estén impulsando acciones transformadoras para la implementación de la Agenda 2030. La segunda es promover la innovación como motor clave de los compromisos de aceleración de los gobiernos locales y regionales hacia la Agenda 2030. Y la tercera, reducir las desigualdades, asegurando un alcance inclusivo de la iniciativa para no dejar ningún territorio atrás, para no dejar a nadie atrás, por supuesto, y para fomentar los valores de solidaridad y equidad mediante una convocatoria específica a los países menos desarrollados. En nuestro caso, el reconocimiento como Local for Action Hub para nuestro proyecto Equalmet, que persigue la incorporación de la perspectiva de género en las políticas públicas locales y, en particular, la promoción de la participación política de las mujeres en la esfera local y territorial en Marruecos, representa una gran oportunidad para tejer vínculos, estrechar alianzas, conseguir compromisos y fortalecer la voluntad política para favorecer no solo un mayor empoderamiento de las mujeres, sino también unas sociedades más justas, más igualitarias y con muchísimo más potencial. Y esto lo conseguiremos a partir del trabajo que hacemos día tras día desde las administraciones locales, los verdaderos catalizadores de los procesos de transformación, no nos olvidemos nunca, para que mañana podamos vivir en un mundo mejor. En ese sentido, yo soy una genuina convencida de que los Local for Action Hubs de CGLU significan y significarán un revulsivo para capitalizar las acciones realizadas y para expandir esos objetivos a otras regiones del mundo. Las ciudades y los territorios tienen una posición única para identificar la problemática y las carencias vitales que nos permiten mejorar la prestación de los servicios públicos. Básicamente porque es que además que en muchas ocasiones conocemos directamente con el nombre y con el apellido a las personas con las que estamos trabajando. Y todo esto es muy necesario para involucrar a todos los actores en el diseño de políticas y estrategias de desarrollo y para abordar las desigualdades, poniendo las necesidades de las personas y las comunidades en el centro de las decisiones, en el centro de nuestras políticas, sin dejar a nadie ni a ningún lugar atrás. Sobre todo hacerlo visible ha sido el objetivo de la edición 2020. Para la edición 2021, la iniciativa Local for Action Hubs de CGLU continuará apoyando y trabajando en el marco del Venice City Solutions, como decía antes, como hub de hubs, dando un sentido unificado a los esfuerzos de los gobiernos locales y empoderando su voz y capacidades como actor único y necesario para la implementación sostenible de las agendas globales. Hagamos entre todas y todos que esta iniciativa, que abordamos con mucha ilusión, se transformen realmente en el catalizador hacia unas comunidades más sostenibles, más resilientes, más justas, igualitarias e inclusivas. Es importante siempre, y acabo, recordar que no podremos transformar de manera global ni podremos conseguir todos esos retos que nos marcamos si no impactamos y empezamos, yo diría, por la base, que son todos esos retos locales y esos impactos locales que proporcionamos desde los gobiernos locales. Pues a partir de aquí, muchas ganas de compartir muchas más cosas, pero sé que no tengo tiempo. Daros las gracias de nuevo. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, muchísimas gracias, Pilar. Si me lo permites, te voy a hacer una pregunta. Primero, felicitarte a ti, a toda la familia de FGLU por los Local for Action Hubs. Es realmente una iniciativa innovadora que conecta con iniciativas que antes compartíamos, desde los Accelerator Labs hasta la propia campaña de acción por los ODS que trabajamos en red, que queremos innovar, que queremos trabajar con nuevos socios, socias, nuevas entidades. Es en ese sentido una iniciativa fantástica y le deseamos el mayor impacto y desde aquí apoyaremos, por supuesto, con todo lo que podamos. Quería hacer una pregunta, Pilar, más en tu rol de alcaldesa, o sea, quizás más personal, ¿no? En tu experiencia, ¿cómo te han ayudado los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible? ¿Cómo ayudan los ODS a una alcaldesa, a un alcalde, a la hora de impulsar políticas públicas, de conectar con la ciudadanía, de generar una mayor implicación de los actores a nivel local? ¿Cuál ha sido tu experiencia? Me sabe mal porque solo tenemos un minuto y medio, pero Pilar.
Y esto daría para mucho más, pero me encanta más la pregunta. Hemos siempre intentado inspirarnos en cada una de nuestras acciones. Me gustaría poder tener tiempo para compartir como nuestro plan de actuación de todo el mandato de los 4 años. Cada una de sus acciones, de sus ejes, están inspirados en esos objetivos. Es decir, cada vez que nosotros, por decir algo, construimos un equipamiento o hacemos una actividad a nivel de los servicios sociales o de cultura o de deporte, cada vez que lo hacemos nosotros tenemos en este momento cuantificado cómo podemos contribuir a la consecución, al impacto y a la consecución de esos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Creo que es muy importante alinear los planes estratégicos y también los planes de actuación de mandato con esos objetivos, porque al final esos objetivos de una manera muy sencilla nos dicen cómo tenemos que trabajar para conseguir vivir en un mundo más justo, en un mundo en el que las personas puedan ser más felices. Y para conseguir ese mundo más justo, más resiliente, como decíamos, más sostenible y sobre todo que las personas podamos ser más felices, tenemos que trabajar de manera muy decidida y además nos queda muy poco tiempo para conseguirlo. Y en nuestro caso, desde Esplugas, cuando empezamos en el mandato, este mandato se inició en el 2019, decidimos que cada una de las acciones, por grande o por pequeña que fuera, estaría alineada y enmarcada con los objetivos, y nosotros tenemos un cuadro de mando en el que cuantificamos cuál es el impacto de cada medida de las políticas locales en esa consecución, ya que no hay que olvidar, y con esto acabo, que el Comité de las Regiones aquí nos dijo hace ya un tiempo que el 66%, en un peso de 2 de cada 3, el 66% de la responsabilidad de la consecución de esos objetivos reside en la acción municipal.
Muchísimas gracias, Pilar. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch back to English. I think there was a nomination as you were speaking to appoint you world mayor.
Oh.
We'll leave this out there. And,
Emilia, I know. Thank you very much.
and we also had, we'll close, we have a final question, which is a general question. So I would invite also Gift to jump in for that one. The question from the audience is there any existing strategic approach to assess the contribution of individuals towards achieving the SDGs? So Gift and Pilar, one or both.
Thank you. I can go first. So the question is there a way to assess individual contributions towards SDGs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm quickly trying to think from an accelerator lab point of view. I know in Zimbabwe, we're trying to look into almost like learning passports, where you learn the material about SDGs, but at the same time, you almost like auto rate yourself how you're doing. And by doing so, you can make a contribution, almost like so instead of NDCs, these are individual DCs, and then the system collects them and kind of shows you that per this region, this is how you're doing, or for this city, this is how you're doing as citizens and as an individual. That's how you're doing in response to what you're learning. So this is one innovation I can think of that we've mapped from an ACLab perspective in Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Thank you, Gift. Pilar, did you want to jump in? Yeah. So in 1 minute, please.
Si puede ser ya en 30 segundos. Sin la participación individual, yo estoy muy convencida que no vamos a conseguir esto. Ya sabíamos que era una gobernanza multinivel, tenemos la necesidad de los estados, de gobiernos regionales, de los gobiernos, por supuesto, locales, que ya hemos dicho que tenemos un papel muy importante, pero esto tiene que ser algo que salga de cada uno y de cada una. Y si esto no sale, esto no lo vamos a conseguir. Pero también tenemos un papel, como hay poco tiempo, tenemos un papel los gobiernos, y es en sensibilizar, hacer pedagogía, explicar que es que no hay otro camino, no way, es que no hay otro camino. Es imprescindible trabajar estos aspectos para que nos demos cuenta que nos jugamos mucho y que todas las personas tienen el derecho a vivir una vida digna y que este planeta es único y que no hay planeta B. Y con eso pues prácticamente ya está todo dicho. Y tenemos mucha faena no solamente en conseguir los objetivos, en localizarlos y conseguirlos, sino también trabajar con la ciudadanía y en hacer muchísima pedagogía y sensibilización.
Thank you so much, Pilar. That's a great closing for this segment. Let me just take a very quick minute to thank all the speakers again, all the host organizations, for this very, very insightful and inspiring conversation. And thank you to the audience. Thank you to all of you out there tuning in and engaging with this conversation. Let me also share a special thanks to my colleague, my dear colleague, Diana Lopez, who has been working tirelessly to bring us together. It has been a great pleasure for me to moderate this session. But don't go anywhere. We still have one last bit left. Let me turn now to, for this very last segment, to Carla Rey, the Secretary General of ICRE, which, as most of you know, is the Italian section of UCLG and one of the organizing partners of this event. We'll invite Carla to present the main findings of the Venice City Solutions edition in 2020 and wrap up this session. Thank you, Carla. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavi. You were fantastic keeping the time. It's not easy to summarize shortly what has been discussed in 2 full days in Venice, but I'll do my best. So the recommendation to the HLPF can be summarized in 7 findings. Focus on the different facets of the visualizing the 2030 agenda in the cities. So the first is visualizing the 2030 agenda to recognize the localizing SDGs. In fact, localizing does not just mean transposing global goals into local actions, but ensuring that local actions shape the transformation to change the world. The current challenge is to accelerate and to synchronize the actions of different stakeholders learning and working together, and recognizing the local initiatives for their impact on international policy development. As Emilia said since the beginning of this session, with the globalization, local issues become global, and the global ones require local collective commitments and action. Second, visualizing the agenda to better understand the local dimension of the SDGs. Cities and territories have a unique position to identify vital needs and gaps to improve the delivery of public services, and to involve all stakeholders in the design of development strategies. The experience and commitment of local authorities must be displayed and recognized for its key potential to drive transformation at all levels and for accelerating the implementation of the SDGs. Third point, visualizing the agenda as a common language between local governments and urban stakeholders. As was said, there are differences in language between different urban actors. The 2030 Agenda and the SDGs can provide a common language that connects the different territorial actors that have an impact both in the lives of citizens and in the global debate. Setting the SDGs as a common language will allow different stakeholders to understand each other, to connect the dots, to go beyond silos, and make sure that individual policies impact collective policies, and that the local reaches the global. 4 point, visualizing the agenda as a framework for functional partnership. To achieve good local governance and to advance on the transformative changes outlined by the 2030 Agenda, functional, horizontal and vertical partnership and between different territories must be promoted as a way to identify new correlations and new ways of working. The very nature of any city solution is showing how the relationship between the various stakeholders is fundamental to trigger the transformation we want. We need inclusive and participatory processes that involve all the society sectors. Fifth, visualizing the agenda to identify individual actions with collective and global impact. The multiplier effect of actions based on the SDGs is not only valid for public action, but for individual actions in the local community that contribute to the achievement of global sustainability. The challenge now is to move from collective impact to global. A false dichotomy has been identified between nature sustainability and people well-being. Platforms and spaces such as Venice City Solution 2030 and UCLG Local for Action hubs can be unique catalysts as leaders from all the sectors work together to define how to restart greener economies, how to redesign a resilient society, and to redefine democracy. 6 point, visualizing as an opportunity, even in time of crisis. The 2030 Agenda must be seen as a local tool within a post-COVID-19 crisis scenario to show how the SDGs are essential for rebuilding cities and rebuilding them better, with the aim of a more sustainable future. The SDGs offer visions and policies for resilient, fair local development to combat the structural urban inequalities that have been more exposed than ever by the COVID-19 pandemic, and to build a new social contract. The last point, visualizing the agenda to build a community based on shared values. In cities and territories, it is easy to identify the dimension of space and people, but often the immaterial aspect of the community that connects them is not even considered. In this perspective, it is urgent to redefine new models of consumption and production, to pay attention to the way in which efficiency and growth are defined, to truly understand the intangible and immaterial sense of the community, careful to leave nobody or no one behind. The community express key values such as social justice, cooperation, decentralization, gender equality, self-government, and accountability that are shared values of the 2030 Agenda. And this is to co-create a sustainable future for cities and territories. I think that that were the conclusions of our last edition. And from my side, I want to thank on behalf of ICRE Local for Action Hub, all the co-organizers that makes Venice City Solution our common platform of exchange. And also all the participants for their contributions to our discussion. And I really hope to see you all for the next edition in November of Venice City Solution. Thank you, Xavi. Thank you, Emilia. Thank you all. We are really a great team, and Venice is really growing inside the Local for Action Hub family. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you all for joining us today in this event. Thank you, UCLG, for this wonderful production, all the team that is behind the scenes doing that this is fluffy and animated and wonderful. So just stay in line, this session is over, but there is the next session organized by UCLG and ONDESA called Accelerating Local Action. So there is going to be like a couple of minutes between one session and the next, but please do not disconnect, stay with us. Thank you.